Very passionate as well about what I'm paying at the pumps, and that's why we wanted to get caught up today with Dan McTeague, president of the Canadians for Affordable Energy. How are you, Dan?
Well, busy, Sam.
No kidding. Everybody wants to chat with you, and I don't know about you, Dan, but who's bringing in carbon tax on April Fool's Day? It certainly was no joke. Walk me through what this will mean for Canadians.
Well, it has meant a 3.26 cents increase. In the past, it's been 2.2 every year. This year, 3.26. They've raised the so-called intensity, and as a result, that brings the total carbon tax up to now to about 16 cents a liter, 16.2 to be exact with HST. It means, of course, that the fastest growing component of gasoline, at least in the past few months, has been this particular carbon tax, but it really does illustrate the point about how fundamental and how important gasoline and diesel are to an economy that where statistics continue to show that inflation is being driven to a large extent by energy inflation. Yes, there's other forms of inflation, but they are a result of, as opposed to sort of standalone factors. And so it comes at a very, very bad time. You mentioned April Fools. It comes at a time in which we switch over from winter to summer gasoline. Sam, that's going to add about 10 to 11 cents a liter in just a week and a half. And then we see the markets today responding to basically OPEC's concern that markets, that is energy markets, driven largely by North American concern about headlines with demand destruction and all sorts of other interesting things, bank crisis, et cetera. You have OPEC now saying, all right, enough is enough. We think oil should be $90 a barrel. You keep it at 67. We're going to, now cut another 500,000 barrels of oil in production every day. So you'll now see gasoline and diesel and, of course, oil prices shooting up 5, 6, 7% just this morning alone.
What do you think we're going to see, let's say, come July 1st? What are we paying with all your expertise, Dan?
Well, even before we get there, Sam, I think by the end of April, we're going to be back to 165, 170.
Wow.
What happens on the May 2-4 weekend all the way into June, which tends to be the very high period for pricing, I suspect, and time will bear this out, that we'll be looking at back to about $1.80 to $1.85 for a good part of the summer. Now, that's a lot better than last year, when we were paying $2.15 at points, but it's still a long way off. And so, these higher for longer prices cemented in place won't go back to $1.30, $1.40. We're going to be looking at a permanent increase, not just supported, of course, by the carbon taxes, but of course a weak Canadian dollar and another tax coming in. The federal government's clean fuel standard, which now they've had to admit, apart from the fact that most Canadians will not, in fact, see they get more than what they pay in carbon taxes. We have a second carbon tax starting on July the 1st. And the first shoe to drop will be crappy mileage from your vehicle. We talked about this last time. More ethanol. Ethanol is burned the way gasoline does, so you're going to be paying more effectively for less.
Do you think Prime Minister Justin Trudeau really understands what this means for average Canadians?
No, he doesn't. And I think the more he pushes on this, the more likely it is that he's going to face the consequences one way or another. I don't think for a moment Canadians can continue to afford this policy of saying, we need to do this because somehow, it's going to change or it's going to have an effect on fires in British Columbia or floods in, some part of the country. I think Canadians are now starting to weigh that and said, up to now, they supported this to the extent that it didn't hurt them, but the impact is substantial. Inflation is real. The inability for about 50% of your listeners right now to make ends meet, or struggling terribly to do that, is something that I think a leader of another party is likely going to pick up on. It's likely to sense. I think my sense is that, having been in this business before, it's the worst political decision you can make. You'd best back off because it's not going to lead to the kind of outcome I think they expect electorally anytime soon.
And Dan, whenever we speak, I always, tend to talk about the gas pumps, picture myself filling up there. But when I think about things like obviously air travel and all of that type of travel as well. I mean, that's got to be reflected somewhere in a ticket, right?
Everywhere. When you have fuel prices going up, you have carbon taxes leading the charge. You have, of course, a weak Canadian dollar, a response to the fact that we're not selling enough of our products. There isn't enough to attract people to Canada. I mean, look, Sam, we should be looking at a Canadian dollar that's trading on par with the U.S. greenback right now. Every time I saw $80 oil, we always had parity. That saves Canadians substantially. I'll give you an example. It's costing you and I about 25 cents a liter because of a weak Canadian dollar. You can imagine what it's doing to food and other commodities that we consume. All of those commodities that we use in this country priced in U.S. dollars. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I do know that the way we're going is not going to work, and it's not going to reduce the emissions that everyone thinks we're going to be reducing. So at the end of the day, it's the old expression: "Where's the beef?"
And not everybody's a Dan McTeague. Like, we look to you because you follow this. You have for in my mind, decades. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it always feels like you've been there, Dan. Which is a good thing. So when we rely on you for this kind of thing, I hear in your voice today, correct me if I'm wrong, I actually hear real frustration in your voice today. Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, frustration is that Sam, I've warned this was going to happen. I've been warning this now for the past several years that as Canada continues to turn its back on its, having the third largest provable reserves in the world, extracting those things responsibly more than any other country that I know on the so-called ESG mandate or the ESG requirements, so-called environmental, social, and governance requirements. We're doing everything. Canada is bending over backwards, and yet we're just doing ourselves in. And I suspect that if tomorrow Canada could get a pipeline built and get more LNG to the rest of the world rather than, allowing the 18 LNG projects to be killed and giving it to our Americans to make all that money. And I'm talking tens of billions of dollars in revenue for the federal government to pay for hospitals and roads and to improve our standard of living. If I could wave a magic wand and ask the green grifters to back off a little bit, I think I'd feel a lot better. But right now, a lot of people have to suffer unnecessarily. I think there is a balance. We've lost that balance, and unfortunately, my old party, the Liberal Party, I think is definitely on the wrong track on this one.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Sam. Don't forget, up 3 cents a liter by Wednesday at least.
Well, I got to fill up, Dan. Thank you. Dan McTeague spending time with us, of course, president of the Canadians for Affordable Energy. We appreciate his time always.